I took the job because it was the only place hiring. The gas station sat off a forgotten stretch of highway in northern Arizona, about 40 miles from the nearest town. One pump island. One small convenience store. A flickering open sign that probably hadn't been replaced in a decade. The surrounding desert stretched flat and endless, broken only by sagging fences and distant rock formations that looked black against the night sky. During the day it was quiet in a peaceful, almost boring way. At night, it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly. Just off. Like the air itself was holding its breath. The owner, a man named Carl, hired me without much of an interview. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in years. Pale skin, deep lines under his eyes, fingers that tapped the counter even when he was standing still. He just asked if I could work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and if I was good at ignoring things. I laughed. He didn't. Before he left my first night, he reached under the counter and pulled out a laminated sheet. The plastic was scratched and yellowed, like it had been handled too many times. He set it in front of me and held it there a second longer than necessary. "Read this carefully," he said quietly. "Most people don't last a week." The sheet was titled in bold letters. Night Protocol. Rule 1. Lock the doors at exactly 11:57 p.m. Rule 2. After midnight, do not allow anyone inside the store. Transactions happen through the service window only. Rule 3. If a customer stares too long without speaking, close the window. Rule 4. If someone asks to use the restroom, say it's out of order. Rule 5. If a customer repeats your name, do not respond. Rule 6. If you see someone standing near pump 3 without a vehicle, turn off the exterior lights for 10 seconds. Rule 7. If they are still there when the lights return, hide. I remember thinking it had to be some elaborate joke. Maybe Carl had a weird sense of humor. Maybe the previous night employees had been dramatic. Desert towns had reputations for eccentric people. I told myself it was just paranoia baked under too much sun. At 11:57 p.m., I locked the doors anyway. The digital clock above the register clicked to 12 a.m., and the station seemed to sink into a heavier silence. The hum of the refrigerators sounded louder. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Outside, the wind dragged sand across the pavement in thin, whispering lines. At 12:13 a.m., the first customer showed up. There were no headlights sweeping across the lot. No crunch of tires on gravel. No engine cutting off. 1 second the pumps were empty, the next there was a figure standing beside pump 2. Tall. Thin. Wearing a grey hoodie pulled low over its face. I stared at the security monitor first, thinking I must have missed something. But the playback showed nothing arriving. It just appeared in frame. It walked toward the service window slowly, hands in its pockets. Its steps were measured, almost mechanical. When it reached the glass, it knocked once. A soft, controlled tap. I slid the window open halfway, just like Rule 2 required. "Pump 2, it said. Its voice was normal. Calm. Maybe too calm. No accent. No emotion. Just flat. I glanced behind it. No vehicle. No bike. Nothing but empty asphalt stretching into darkness. "Cash or card?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Cash." It pulled out a small wad of bills. They looked old. Wrinkled. The kind that felt damp even when they weren't. I counted them quickly and rang up the pump. My hands felt colder than they should have. It didn't blink. Not once. Most people blink without thinking. Micro movements you don't notice unless you're looking for them. But this thing's eye stayed fixed on mine the entire time. Unmoving. Unnatural. Long night. I asked casually, trying to convince myself this was just a strange traveler. It tilted its head slightly. Then it repeated my name. Exactly how Carl had said it earlier. Evan. The sound of it made my stomach drop. Not because it knew my name. My tag was pinned to my shirt. Anyone could read it. But it said it the same way Carl had. Same tone. Same pacing. Like it had heard him. Like it had been there. Rule 5. If a customer repeats your name, do not respond. Every instinct told me to say something. To ask how it knew. To tell it to stop. Instead, I kept my mouth shut and slid the window closed slowly. It didn't move. It just stood there, staring through the glass. After a few seconds, I forced myself to look down at the register. When I finally looked back up, it was gone. No footsteps fading into the distance. No car engine turning over. Just empty pavement under harsh fluorescent lights. Pump 2's display read that exactly $10 of gas had been dispensed. But there was still no vehicle. I didn't sleep the next day. The second night, I locked the doors at 11:57 p.m. again. At 12:08 a.m., I checked the cameras. Something was standing near Pump 3. There was still no vehicle. I tried telling myself it was just exhaustion. Desert nights mess with your head. No light pollution. No traffic noise. No distant city glow to remind you the world still exists beyond your tiny square of concrete and fluorescent light. Just wind dragging sand across asphalt and the endless black of open land. After a few weeks on the night shift, your thoughts start sounding louder than they should. At 12:02 a.m., I saw it again. Standing at Pump 3. No car. No headlights cutting through the dark highway. No engine ticking as it cooled. Just a tall figure beneath the buzzing canopy light. I froze behind the counter, pretending I hadn't noticed it. The security monitor showed the same thing, one pump island, empty highway, and that figure. It stood too still. Hands hanging at its sides. Hoodie up. Face lost in shadow. Rule 6. Turn off the exterior lights for 10 seconds. Carl's handwriting had been shaky when he wrote that one. If you see someone at the pumps without a vehicle, kill the outside lights. Count to 10. Turn them back on. If they're still there, don't engage. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe because part of me didn't want to confirm it was real. But my fingers moved anyway. I reached under the counter and flipped the breaker. The canopy light snapped off. The lot went black. Not dim. Not shadowed. Black. The kind of darkness that feels thick, like it has weight. I could hear my own breathing. The hum of the refrigerators behind me. The faint rattle of the wind against the windows. 1, 2, 3. By 5, I regretted it. The darkness felt aware. Like something was standing closer than it should be. 10. I flipped the breaker back on. Light flooded the pumps again. It was closer. Halfway between Pump 3 and the store window now. It hadn't walked. I hadn't heard footsteps. It was simply nearer. The hoodie was gone. Its face was visible. And something about it was wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Not grotesque. Not decomposed. Not bloody. Just stretched. Like someone had described a human face from memory and then sculpted it slightly off. The eyes a little too wide apart. The mouth pulled a fraction too far toward the ears. The skin too smooth, too tight across the cheekbones. It smiled. Too wide. Slowly, deliberately, it raised one hand and knocked on the glass. Twice. A pause. 3 times. Another pause. Once. The sound carried through the store like someone tapping on a coffin lid. I didn't open the door. It leaned closer to the glass, and that's when I noticed something worse. Its legs. They bent backward. Not dramatically. Not like a deer or some horror movie creature. Just slightly reversed at the knee. Enough to make my brain trip over the shape of it. It tilted its head. Bathroom, it asked. Its voice was soft. Calm. Almost polite. Rule 4. Never let them inside. The bathroom is always out of order. It's out of order, I said, forcing my voice not to shake. It stared at me. Didn't blink. The smile didn't fade. Then its lips moved again. It's out of order. Same tone. Same pacing. Same inflection. Perfect. It wasn't mocking me. It wasn't repeating like a parrot. It was copying. I felt my stomach drop. We stood there like that for what felt like minutes. Me gripping the counter. It pressed lightly to the glass, breath not fogging the surface. Then it stepped backward. Slowly. Carefully. Like it was relearning how to move. Its arms hung loose, swaying wrong. Its knees bending in that almost backward way with each step. And then, its body folded. That's the only word for it. Folded. Like a marionette whose strings had been cut mid-performance. Its torso buckled sideways. Its limbs collapsed in unnatural angles. It dropped straight down, disappearing below the bottom edge of the window. I gasped and rushed forward despite every rule telling me not to. When I reached the glass and looked out, there was a coyote standing exactly where it had fallen. Still. Silent. Its fur caught in the fluorescent light. Sand-colored. Thin. Ordinary. Except for its eyes. They were fixed on me. Unblinking. And its mouth was curled upward. Not panting. Not baring teeth. Smiling. Coyotes don't smile. At least, not like that. It held my gaze for a few seconds that stretched far too long. Then, slowly, deliberately, it shifted its weight. And stood up. On two legs. Not fully upright like a person. More like something trying to approximate it. Its front paws hung awkwardly in front of its chest as it balanced there for just a moment. Long enough to make sure I saw. Then it dropped back down to all fours, turned, and walked into the desert. The wind swallowed it almost immediately. I stood there, staring at the empty stretch beyond the pumps. The security monitor still showed nothing but sand and highway. 12:06 a.m. For minutes. That's all it had been. I flipped through the rule sheet with shaking hands. There was nothing about coyotes. Nothing about them walking away. Only one final line at the bottom of the page, something I hadn't noticed before. If it leaves on two legs, lock the door and do not look outside again until sunrise. I reached up slowly and turned the open sign off. By the fourth night, they came in pairs. Always after midnight. Always without vehicles. At first, I told myself I just wasn't hearing engines. The desert wind out here could swallow sound whole. The highway stretched black and empty in both directions, 40 miles from the nearest town, and sometimes I'd go an hour without a single pair of headlights passing by. So maybe I was missing something. But no. There were never tire tracks in the dust the next morning. No fresh footprints beyond the ones that led straight to the pumps and then vanished. They just appeared. Sometimes they looked like truckers, wearing stained flannel and heavy boots, bull caps pulled low. Sometimes like teenagers, hoodies up, shoulders hunched, whispering to each other and laughing a little too quietly. Once, it was an elderly woman in a pale blue nightgown, thin grey hair hanging loose around her shoulders, hands folded politely in front of her. But something was always slightly off. Their hands were too long. Not by much, just enough that when they reached for the door handle, their fingers curled around it in a way that felt wrong. Their eyes reflected too much light, even when the lot was nearly dark. Like an animal caught in headlights. And their smiles. Their smiles never shifted. They held them too steady. Too perfectly. They never blinked. They always tried to get inside. Bathroom? Phone. Can we come in? Their voices sounded almost normal. Almost. But there was a hollow undertone, like the words were being pushed through a speaker hidden somewhere behind their teeth. The first few nights, I followed the rules exactly as Carl had written them in that stained notebook under the counter. Do not unlock the door after 11 p.m. Do not respond to requests for help outside. If they knock after midnight, turn off pump 3 and wait. If you hear your name, do not answer. If you hear your own voice, hide. Rule 7. Hide. The first time they knocked from behind the building, I nearly broke that rule. It was around 2:13 a.m. I remember because I'd been staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until sunrise like it might save me. The knock came from the back wall near the storage room. 3 slow taps. Then a whisper. Evan? My blood went cold. It was my voice. Not close to it. Not similar. Mine. Same scratch in the throat. Same tired edge. Same nervous laugh at the end of my breath. Evan, it's me. I locked myself out. I didn't move. I couldn't. The whisper came again, closer this time, sliding along the back wall as if whatever was out there was dragging its mouth across the concrete. Come on, man. Don't do this. It's cold. The security monitor flickered. For half a second, the back camera came online. There was no one there. But the whisper continued, circling. Let me in. Rule 7. Hide. So I did. I killed the interior lights, crouched behind the counter, and pressed my hands over my ears. I stayed like that for nearly 20 minutes, listening to my own voice beg, plead, laugh softly, then grow impatient. Then angry. When the sun finally bled into the horizon, everything outside looked normal again. Too normal. One night, I made a mistake. It had been quiet for almost an hour. I thought maybe they weren't coming. Maybe I'd imagined the last 3 nights. Maybe isolation was getting to me. Then the knock came at the door. 2 figures stood outside the glass. They looked like truckers again. Broad shoulders. Thick beards. One of them lifted a hand and tapped gently. Bathroom? I didn't answer. I reached for the switch to shut off pump 3 like the rule said. But my hand slipped. It took me 2 tries. By the time the lot went dark, I realized it hadn't been fast enough. When the emergency lights flickered back on, there weren't 2 figures anymore. There were 3. Standing together beneath the dead canopy lights. All smiling. All whispering. Their mouths moved, but I couldn't hear the words. Not until one of them stepped closer to the glass. That's when I saw it clearly. It was shaped like me. Same height. Same build. Same cheap black jacket I'd bought before taking this job. The hairline was identical. The scar near the eyebrow I got when I was 12, it had that too. It leaned toward the window, breath fogging the glass. Its lips moved slowly, deliberately. Switch. The other 2 turned their heads toward it in perfect synchronization, smiles stretching just a little wider. I stumbled back from the door, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. The thing outside lifted its hand and pressed its palm against the glass. Its fingers were too long. The reflection didn't quite line up with mine. And then I understood. They weren't trying to get in. Not really. The door wasn't the point. The questions. The whispers. The imitations. They were practicing. Testing. Learning. They didn't need inside the store. They needed inside my life. Every night they came closer to getting it right. My voice. My posture. My face. That thing outside wasn't asking to enter. It was offering a trade. Switch. I don't know what happens if I unlock that door. I don't know if I'd even still be me by morning. But I know this much. They are not stranded travelers. They are not lost. And they're not random. They come in pairs because one watches. One learns. And when they're ready, they come in threes. Carl never mentioned why the last guy quit. I should have asked. The gas station sat off a forgotten stretch of highway in northern Arizona, 40 miles from the nearest town. One pump island. One squat convenience store. A buzzing soda cooler and a flickering red open sign that looked older than me. During the day it was just quiet. At night, it felt like the world had ended everywhere else and forgotten to tell this place. Carl hired me without much of an interview. Asked if I could work 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., said the pay was decent because most people don't last. He laughed when he said it. I thought he meant boredom. Or drunks passing through. He never mentioned why the last guy quit. On my 7th night, I found out. At exactly 2:46 a.m., the power cut out. Not just outside, the highway lights, the pump displays, the soda fridge hum. Everything died at once. The store dropped into a thick, suffocating dark. A second later, the emergency lights flickered on, washing the aisles in a dim red glow that made the candy bars and chip bags look rotten. That's when someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow taps. I froze behind the counter. We locked the doors at 2 a.m. because no one sane needed gas at that hour. The highway had been empty for the last hour. I was sure of it. 3 more taps. Then a voice. My voice. Let me in. Every muscle in my body locked. It wasn't close. It wasn't muffled. It sounded exactly like I'd stepped outside and spoken through the glass. I forgot my keys, it added, calm and casual. Just open up. I stayed behind the counter. My heart pounded so hard I thought the thing outside could hear it. The emergency lights flickered again, stuttering like they were struggling to stay alive. The knocking came back, louder this time. 3 taps turned into a steady pounding. The glass door rattled in its frame. Then scratching, long, deliberate drags of something sharp against the surface. My throat tightened. I could see a silhouette through the red glow. Same height. Same build. Then the glass cracked. A thin fracture spidered out from the center. The emergency lights flickered violently. I glanced up, instinct, maybe, to the convex security mirror mounted above aisle 3. And I saw myself standing at the door. Smiling. Eyes wide. Unblinking. The real me was crouched behind the counter, hands gripping the edge so tight my knuckles hurt. But in the mirror's reflection, I was at the entrance, one palm pressed flat against the glass, head tilted slightly like I was curious. The version of me outside looked better. Straighter posture. Shoulders back. A calm confidence I'd never had. Its smile was steady, not nervous. Controlled. Complete. It tilted its head further, as if studying me. Then it mouthed something. You're almost ready. I didn't hear it through the glass. I heard it inside my head. Carl's voice echoed in my memory from that first night when he handed me the keys. Most people don't last a week. The pounding stopped. Instantly. No footsteps. No rustling wind. Just silence pressing in from all sides. The red light steadied. The cracked glass held. I forced myself to look away from the mirror and toward the door. Nothing. No silhouette. No one standing there. My chest heaved as I waited for another knock. Another voice. But all I could hear was the faint hum returning as the power kicked back on. The main lights flickered to life. The refrigerators buzzed. The pump displays outside rebooted one by one. It was 2:52 a.m. Like nothing had happened. My legs felt weak as I walked toward the door. The crack in the glass was real. A jagged starburst at eye level. And outside, illuminated by the harsh white canopy lights, were muddy tracks leading from pump 3 to the entrance. One set. They stopped at the door. I swallowed and followed them with my eyes. Another set of prints led away from the door, back toward the desert beyond the pumps. The ones leaving were clearer, deeper. I recognized the pattern instantly. They were mine. Same worn tread on the right heel. Same chipped edge on the left sole. I hadn't stepped outside all night. I quit the next morning. Didn't wait for Carl. Left the keys on the counter with a note that just said, "I understand." As I drove away, the sun barely rising over the desert, I told myself it was stress. Sleep deprivation. Some kind of shared hallucination with a broken mirror and coincidence. But I look back once. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself it was empty. Someone was standing at pump 3. Wearing my jacket. Hands in the pockets the way I always stood when I was nervous. Watching the highway. Waiting. The distance blurred the details, but I could see the posture. The stillness. The way its head turned slightly as a car crested the far hill miles away. It didn't wave. It didn't move. It just waited for night. I don't think they were ever customers. I think the gas station is bait. And the night shift? It's training. It studies you. Learns your posture. Your voice. The way you smile when you're trying to look normal. And when it finally gets it right. When the reflection looks more confident than the real thing. You don't last past the 7th night. So if you're ever driving down an empty highway and you see a remote gas station glowing in the dark, the clerk standing too still behind the counter. Watch their eyes. If they don't blink, don't convince yourself it's nothing. And if they smile too wide when you pull in, don't stop. Keep driving. Because if they've learned how to be you, they don't need you anymore.